My name is Scott Duncan, and this is my grandma Dorothea Titchener in the last year of her life. My grandma was afflicted with a disease called Lewy body dementia that affected her mind and her body. This disease confined her to a bed for her last few years before she passed away. My grandma was not always like this, however. When I was younger, I remember my grandma as a very active and loving person who gave all of her affection to her many grandchildren. Before she had Lewy body dementia, my grandma had achieved many accomplishments in her life and was a hard-working and intelligent woman. My grandma's daughter and my mother was her strongest champion, fighting for her until the very end. But first, we must start from the very beginning.
My mother was born in 1931 in Santa Monica, California, and she met my dad at North Hollywood High School. They were high school sweethearts, and after they graduated high school, they went on to USC. She got a teaching credential and an English degree at USC, and after she graduated there, she became a school teacher in Compton, California, and she taught kindergarten there for 3 years. After 3 years of teaching, she decided to start her own family, and she had 5 children of her own. When we were teenagers, she decided to go back to work, and she couldn't get a job in teaching because there were really no jobs at that time, so she decided to work at a computer manufacturing company. And she went to work there as a file clerk and worked her way up and eventually became a vice president of operations at Computerland Corporate. In 1991, she started having a variety of symptoms. It started with pneumonia. She contracted pneumonia and she never really quite recovered from it. She started having excessive fatigue. She was tired all the time. She was having trouble swallowing one night, and she had aches and pains all over her body and didn't really understand what was going on, and she went to the doctor and they did a lot of tests. Couldn't really find any specific issue, so they diagnosed her with fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome, and both of those diseases are commonly diagnosed when doctors aren't really quite sure what's wrong, because there's really no test for those diseases and there's also no cure. So it was clear that something was wrong, but it just wasn't clear what was wrong. At that time, my siblings didn't really understand what was happening, other than that we knew that she was struggling, but she was still fairly mobile at that time, and she, although she wasn't working, she was still having the family over to her house, and she was interacting with her grandchildren quite a bit, and that lasted for many years. And then in about 2005, my sister found that my mom had not, she had not done her taxes for 3 years, which was really out of character for my mom. It's just, not filing your taxes for 3 years is obviously a huge problem. And another thing that happened that year was that my mom had actually called my sister on the phone. My sister lived a mile away, and she asked my sister to come over to turn the light off for her. And we were very puzzled by that. Like, why would my mother call my sister when the light was just a few feet away? And we also found out that she had been sleeping in her recliner, that she wasn't getting up and going and laying down in bed and sleeping in a bed anymore. And she had been, we had a 2-story house, and she had been going upstairs to a bedroom. She had moved downstairs, so her world was getting smaller and smaller to the point where she was staying in a recliner. When my mom was first starting to have the more rapid decline, when she was still living at home, I have one brother and one sister who just felt like she needed to exercise more. And in fact, that's what the doctor said when she was going from a cane to a walker. She said, "Oh, your mom just needs to exercise more." And so that was something that one of my brothers and one of my sisters thought was, there's nothing wrong with her. She just needs to exercise more. And I remember talking to my brother and telling him that I was going to take her to a neurologist, that I got a referral to a neurologist. and that I really thought that something was wrong. And he said, "No, you don't think something's wrong, do you? I don't believe it. I don't, I'm going to feel really bad if there's something wrong."
Your brother was in denial?
I think one brother and one sister were definitely in denial. They didn't want to. It's a nicer thought to think you could exercise your way out of something rather than have a disease like this, because, the bottom line is, it's progressive.
Lewy body dementia is a disease that manifests slowly over time and can affect many parts of a person's mental and physical abilities. The disease is caused by a buildup of protein deposits in a person's nerve cells in their brain called Lewy bodies. This causes a multitude of symptoms such as visual hallucinations, rigid muscles, muscle tremors, dizziness, confusion, memory loss, drowsiness, and even depression. These symptoms are progressive, meaning that they will worsen over time. There is no cure for Lewy body dementia, and most people with the disease do not survive more than 8 years after symptoms start.
It's very common with Lewy body disease that, especially people who have gone to college and had careers and they're intelligent, they do have a sense that there's something wrong as the disease starts to progress. And my mom did try to hide the fact that she was seeing things. There was a time when I brought her to the doctor, and she said, "What are all these bugs on the floor?" And this was before I understood that bugs were one of her hallucinations that she actually did have quite frequently. But this was one of the first times, and I actually tried to explain it away, like those are just spots, and then she just brushes it off and says, "Oh, don't you know what, I'm kidding you." It was clear to me that there was something going on with my mom, and what I decided to do was look on Google. At that time, Google was relatively new. WebMD and some of these other websites were brand new, but I decided to research it and see what I could find. After doing that, I became convinced that she had a neurological problem, and so I decided that I would get a referral from her doctor to a neurologist to see if we could find out what was wrong with her. So I decided to make a list of all of her symptoms and the progression, how she'd gone from, a woman who was working and traveling to somebody who didn't leave her home, wouldn't drive in her car, was, shuffling with a walker, and whose hands were shaking. And so the doctor gave me the referral to the neurologist once I wrote those symptoms down and had it all in one place. So after going to the neurologist, he ran many tests, CAT scans, etc., and said that she didn't seem to have Parkinson's, and he kind of shrugged and said, "But it's like Parkinsonism, but I guess she has Parkinson's." And he was very unclear on it, but he decided to prescribe a drug called amantadine. So my mom started taking the amantadine, and we got a call from the assisted living facility that my mom she had fingernail scissors, and she was digging at her nails because she said there were bugs in them. And so it was obvious that there was something wrong. We didn't know what it was. We took her to the emergency room, and they brought her in and they talked to her. And that was the first time she'd said to me, "Oh, I see Donald Duck over there." And I didn't know if she was kidding or what, but otherwise she seemed pretty lucid by the time we were at the emergency room, and the doctor came and examined her and said, there's really nothing wrong with her, she's fine, and he sent her home. I was extremely frustrated and really angry that I was going to a doctor who kept dismissing the problems that my mom was having. They did not have geriatric doctors at the medical facility that I was taking my mom to, and it was clear to me that there was something going on, and it was just baffling and just made me so angry that the doctors didn't really seem to want to take the initiative or spend the time to figure out what was wrong. Then it wasn't long after that we got another call from the assisted living facility that she had fainted and she hit her head, and so she had to go back to the emergency room. And this time she was admitted to the hospital, and her cognitive symptoms were much worse. When she became conscious again, she was having paranoid delusions that the hospital nurses were trying to poison her. And that was something completely new that we didn't understand. You know, she obviously was extremely distressed herself, and it was hard to try and comfort her and make her feel, you know, safe. And it was clear that she was in a lot of distress. And just, you know, as her daughter, it's very, very hard to watch that and want to do something about it and not know what to do. So at that point, they switched her neurologist from the one that we had been seeing that had diagnosed her to the head of neurology. And he switched her from amantadine, which is a drug that later I found out was something that you shouldn't give to elderly patients, and it was causing the cognitive problems, and it was causing the fainting. And that doctor switched her off amantadine and put her on Cinnamate, which is another Parkinson's drug, and it's meant to help with the tremors and the stiffness and you know, difficulty in movement. But still, she continued to have cognitive issues. My sister worked as a psychologist at the San Francisco Veterans Administration Hospital, and her colleagues there had a relationship with the UCSF Memory and Aging Clinic, and they're very good at diagnosing cognitive problems. And she was able to get us an appointment at the Memory and Aging Clinic, and that's where we went to finally get the diagnosis for my mom. We had to leave her medical facility because they were unable to diagnose her and go outside and get a diagnosis from UCSF. It was a huge relief when we finally got the correct diagnosis for my mom. Part of it was that finally she was going to be on the correct drugs, because I knew she was taking way too many drugs, and they helped pare down the drugs. We got rid of a lot of drugs, and then she started taking Aricept. And the Aricept is what helps with the cognitive problems, because she was having a lot of hallucinations, seeing bugs and seeing things that weren't there, that were very distressing to her, which made it very distressing to us also. So while it was a relief to have the diagnosis, it also really made me angry that we had spent, you know, months and months and months, well, years if you go back to the original problems, but it's possible they didn't really know about Lewy body back in the early 90s. But by 2006, when we finally got the diagnosis, they really did know about it, and I think her medical facility should have known. After she was discharged from the hospital and taken off the amantadine, she was unable to walk because she'd been in bed for a week, and that's all it takes when you have this kind of a disease. That, you know, after a week of not being on your feet, then you can't walk. And so she went to a skilled nursing facility where they put her in physical therapy so that she could get up and walk again. And she was able to get up out of bed and walk like a few feet with a walker, but that meant that she couldn't go back to the assisted living facility. So from that point, we had to put her in a board and care, which is something that's you know, at a person's home, but it's a higher level of care. I think my mom liked the board and care to the extent that she they really liked her there. And I mean, the fact that she had dementia, you know, meant that she didn't retain things, you know, that long in memory. And so she was actually pretty overall happy while she was there. But that was really because there had been so many cognitive changes in her. It's not a place where I think most people would want to be, but she was happy there. I would go visit her once a week and bring her things and visit with her for, you know, the evening. And we always had very, very, you know, nice visits with a lot of talking and laughter, and we both enjoyed it very much. When you have a parent that has dementia, like this Lewy body dementia, they're not really quite the same person that you knew when you were growing up. They're somewhat the same, but yet they're different. She always knew who I was, but and she knew current affairs. She knew, she watched television. She knew what was going on. She liked to hear about, movies I'd seen. So she was good about talking about current events. I also talked to her a lot about things in the past because, retaining the, long-term memories don't go away. But it's not the same parent that you knew. And she was bedridden for most of the last 4 years of her life, so she was unable to, leave the room for that period of time. So you kind of build a new kind of a relationship. For about the last 9 months of her life, she actually did very well. And for a minute there, she was almost getting better as opposed to worse. My mom was always an avid reader, and I used to, order books for her and have them sent to her home, and back when she lived at her house. And I continued to try to do that when she was at the board and care, but eventually, she was unable to read because it takes too much concentration. But for a couple of months there, she started to read again, which was something that was always very enjoyable to her throughout her life. So that was nice, and she was pretty comfortable that last year. And then it was in May of 2010. She started having an upset stomach and not feeling well, and it was about a period of 3 weeks where she was declining, and I was trying to find reasons for it, or drugs possibly that might help her. And as it turned out, by the end of the month, there was really nothing that could be done, and she was on hospice by that time. There were hospice nurses that were coming every week, and we talked to the hospice nurse, and at that point she said that it was probably time to start the atropine to help her not feel any distress and to be comfortable. So that's what we did, and then she died the next morning. My mom passed away this morning. It's been a long 4 years with ups and downs, and she showed incredible strength and resilience right up to the end. I'm going to miss her terribly. I have been visiting with her every week, having wonderful conversations with her, reminiscing, talking about current events, laughing, and having fun. I am so grateful that this past year since her surgery last June has been such a great year. She had not been ill since the surgery, and this allowed her to become much clearer cognitively and much more engaged. She would tell me how grateful she was for my visits with her every week, and that she felt she had nothing to offer, nothing to give back to me. I would tell her I received just as much happiness from my visits with her, if not more. She had been bedridden for the past 3 years and unable to care for herself for the past 4. And she handled this with grace and dignity. She was not angry, she was not demanding or self-pitying. She was happy, cheerful, considerate, and extremely giving. I have learned so much from her this past 4 years about what is truly important in life, and it has been a great gift. I am happy for her that she no longer suffers. She can be still and rest in peace. When my mom just a sec.
Understand.
When my mom was confined to a room and a bed for 4 years, and I would go and visit her, and she was always cheerful, happy to see me, very upbeat. It really taught me what's important in life. And sometimes you just live your life and you think, oh, I need this, or you think you need things that you just don't need. There's so many things in life that are not nearly as important as you think, and having a parent who's living in that situation helps you focus on what's most important in life. And to me, that was a great gift that she gave me.